Hey yo, what's good y'all, it's Stinger, and today I'm going to be showing each and every one of you how you can make some cute Pluggnb beats in the style of Capzlock. Now, I describe this as cute Pluggnb because I really don't know what else to call it, but if you have a better descriptor for Capzlock style, please let me know down in the comments down below. But yeah, I've been seeing Capzlock pop up a lot on my feed, and I've been really into their style as of recently, especially their beats. And seeing his music inspired me to make this beat. So without any further yapping, the beat that we're going to be going over today sounds a little something like this. So the first thing we're going to go over here is the melody. And as you can see, the first part of our melody is super complex, but I'm going to break it down piece by piece. Alright, so the first thing I start with when making my melodies is always the bass line. And for these kind of beats, my go-to chord progression or bass line is going to be the Royal Road chord progression. And that progression is going from the 4 to the 5 to the 3 to the 6. This progression is extremely common in J-rock and all types of Japanese music, and I find that it transfers over very well to Pluggnb. So with that being said, this is what our bass line sounds like. Alright, so after I had that bass line, I copied it and put it up by an octave. And then from there, I formed our chords. And it's important to use big chords in these kind of melodies because you want a lot of notes to play around with. There's going to be a lot of arpeggiation and a lot of displacement later on in the melody. So if you already have these notes ready for you, it's going to make it a whole lot easier. Other than that, this is pretty simple stuff. Just using sevenths, ninths, and octave inversions. And then I'm also introducing a little bit of chromaticism, which means going out of the scale in this chord. And I do that by taking the sixths of our scale being A and making it flat, so now it's G sharp or A flat. If you need some kind of chromaticism in your melody, making the sixth flat is guaranteed to give you a good sound. Either that or make a diminished chord by taking the third and fifth of your chord and putting it down by one semitone or making it flat. So with that being said, this is what our chords sound like. Now after that, this is where that faux arpeggiation and displacement comes in. With the original notes of our chords, I'm just moving them around and placing them in different spots. This gives the melody a lot more energy and also just makes it way more interesting. And when you're displacing notes like this, find a groove that you like with your first chord and try to keep that consistent throughout the other chords in your chord progression. That way there's a consistent groove and rhythm in your melody. And as you can see right here, I'm not only just displacing notes, but I'm adding in extra filler notes. Feel free to do that, as yet again, this makes your melody much more interesting and gives it a little bit more energy. So with that being said, this is what it sounds like when the notes are displaced. As you can tell, we already have a pretty good product, but it's kind of lacking character, which is where the final step of our melody comes in, being top-line melodies. Adding in top-line melodies, as I mentioned, gives your melody a lot more character, and also just makes it much more full as it's spanning a bunch of octaves. For my top-line melodies, I like to start with the fifth of the chord that I'm working with at the moment. I don't really have any music science to explain why that sounds good, but generally I find when I start with the fifth, it's generally much easier for me to create the rest of the top-line melody, because when I hear the fifth in my head, I'll hear the next note, which allows me to create the rest of the top line melody. So as you can see, I have this really simple top line melody that repeats in both halves. And I also have these really quick stair set patterns. So this stair set goes down and then goes up. This stair set goes up and then goes down. And then this stair set goes down and then goes up. And with these as well, I'm also starting with the fifth of the chord that we're working with at the moment. So our chord at the moment starts with the bass line of A and the fifth is E. It's not exactly a rule that you have to follow, but if you're feeling stuck in your top line melodies, try starting out with the fifth of the chord that you're working with. So with that being said, this is what the first melody sounds like all together. Now, aside from that, we only have a couple other melodic components, and I'm gonna go over them pretty quickly because there's not really much that needs to be covered. The next thing that I threw down is addictive keys using those same chords that we had in the first part of making our melody. After that, I threw down this high octave violin. And for this first half, yet again, I'm reintroducing the aspect of using the fifth of our chords. And I start off with the same here using the fifths, but just to give it more variation, I switch up the last part. And the final melodic component is this pad from Omnisphere. And yet again, I just have it playing those same chords. As for melody mixing, I have an entire tutorial as to how I mix my melodies on my channel. So if you want to know how to get your melodies to sound like mine, sorry, that sounds like super egotistical. If you want to get your melodies to sound like how I make my melodies sound, then you can check out the video in the top right, whichever one is right. I still don't know, I'm sorry. And in that video, I fully cover how I mix my melodies. So now with that being said, this is what our entire melody sounds like together. As you can tell, that E piano is the highlight of our melody. The other things kind of just act as background layers. And that's perfect because that E piano is a crazy, outstanding melody. And if you try to add more on top of it, like leads and other counter melodies, the melody might sound cluttered. So now that we've covered the melody, let's go over the drums. And before I go over the drums, I forgot to mention what preset I used for the electric piano. And it's going to be the vintage EP2. All right, so now let's go over the drums. All right, so when making these kind of beats, I like to go with Pluggnb sounds for the drums. And one drum kit that I use a lot when it comes to Pluggnb sounds is going to be Shadow's Valentine kit. And that drum kit gets so much use out of me. It has literally all the essential sounds that you need for Pluggnb. And most of the drum sounds in this beat are from that kit. This is not a paid promotion from Shadow, nor is it any kind of promotion from Shadow. I just genuinely enjoy that kit and use it a lot. So with that being said, the first thing that I threw down is this 808. And all our 808 is doing is following our bass line. And it's playing a stupid simple pattern. Didn't want to go too crazy with this because we're working at a pretty fast tempo. And if I started adding in a bunch of extra notes, it might have sounded a little bit cluttered. So with that being said, this is what the 808 sounds like. The next thing that I threw down after that is going to be our hi-hat. And yet another kit plug here, I'm sorry, but this hi-hat MIDI is from my Ascension hi-hat MIDI kit. The kit contains 15 hi-hat MIDIs in a bunch of different genres, and it's 100% free, so if you want to download it, you can get it in the description. But this hi-hat MIDI is basically just playing a bunch of spaced out notes, not a two-step rhythm. This gives our hi-hat pattern a little bit more dead space, which in turn gives our drums a little bit more bounce. And then within this hi-hat pattern, I also sparsely added in some rolls. So with that being said, this is what the pattern sounds like. After that, since our hi-hat pattern is a little bit unorthodox in its bounce, I threw down this tambourine hitting on every downbeat just so that we have some kind of basis to rely on when it comes to our rhythm. After that, kind of acting as a counter snare, I threw down this Pluggnb rim. And with these kind of beats, don't be afraid to overcomplicate your rim pattern. One thing I've been talking about a lot in this beat is, oh, let's not make the melody too cluttered. Let's not make the 808 pattern too cluttered. But since rims are kind of a background component, it's okay to make these cluttered and it's almost essential to do so. So yeah, don't be afraid to throw down a lot of notes for your rims. And with that being said, this is what our rim pattern sounds like. Aside from that, the rest of the drums are pretty simple. I threw down a clap, threw down a crash, threw down this perk, and threw down this shaker. So with that being said, this is what those drums sound like in their entirety. As you can tell, it's nothing too crazy, but it's also nothing too simple. We have a relatively bouncy hi-hat, a hard-hitting 808, and some perks to fill in some dead space in the drums. So now that we've covered the melody and the drums, this is what everything all together sounds like. There you have it. Now we have a beat that's ready for Capzlock and ready for him to make a Sanrio Hello Kitty edit out of it. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned something new. If you have any questions, please feel free to throw them in the comments down below and I will do my best to answer them. Also consider checking out my Patreon where I post the FLPs to all of my beats in all of my videos, including this one. That way, if you wanted to study the mixing, mastering, the arrangement, all that kind of stuff, it's right at your fingertips. And finally, consider subscribing as I post 1 tutorial a week and 2 sound kits a month. Other than that, that's going to be it. Peace.